We are back with the video, folks. Okay, so yet again, unfortunately, we are still back to doing this kind of video. I have my iMovie set up. My YouTube seems to be working better, but I'm not trusting it because my computer's been acting like a fucking idiot for the last while. So, what we're gonna do, we're gonna do a record review. This is one I was kind of waiting for quite some time. Now, normally most reviewers will always do a review before the record comes out. I really didn't have that option. So essentially, I'm doing this from a post Spotify listen. Yeah, I know. So, Spotify doesn't always give you the, give you the goods when it comes to, giving the artist what they deserve. Well, I have to wait till records are released for me to go buy them. So, released May 1st, as it were, Solitude in Madness, a brutal death metal release from the monsters of it, Vader. Now, what a very brutal death metal record it is. All of the typical Vader style, death metal style, riffing and so on and so forth. Never heard of Vader? Let me give you a quick bio. So if you have, and also, just to preface this, if you see me looking up, I'm reading from notes that I have written, as it makes my life easier and I don't make mistakes. Vader formed in 1983 by then Peter Wazarek and Vika Rebelski. Now, these guys are a Polish death metal band. So these guys have gone through several lineup changes in their career, illustrious career, I should say, with Peter being the only constant member of the band. Since 2011, though, Peter, who originally started on bass, switched over to guitar, or has been on guitar and vocals. Actually, he's been on guitar since 83, and 89, I think he took over the vocal lead. So he now has guitarist Marek Pijak, bassist Thomas Halicki, and British drummer James Stewart. Now, what I do want to mention here is that they started out as a heavy metal group. They did go to thrash, eventually to speed, and then in the late 80s, they switched over to death metal. Now, on to the review. Now, I'm going to preface this first, right off the bat, by stating that in no way, shape, or form am I a full-fledged death metal fan. I do like some death metal. There are many records there's a couple that I own. Nothing too extreme though. Mostly in the Cannibal Corpse vein. Or am I an aficionado? I never claim that I'm a huge death metal fan. Now, with that being said, there are good parts of this record, and there's some bad parts. The bad parts are much, much smaller. And it's more or less me nitpicking, really. But let's get to the good, shall we? So this record from start to finish is probably my favorite death metal release of the last few years. And as I said, there's some good and some bad to this. Peter's hammering riffs, blood-curdling vocals are absolutely a total mindfuck of the body. With some of the... It's all through this record. His riffing is straight out... it's almost straight out of the late 80s, early 90s, when death metal really started to take over from where thrash left off. And I'm kind of glad that he did go from bass to guitars, because I don't know if they would have had such a longevity had he stayed on bass. Then again, I really don't know. And I'm just getting into Vader as of the last 4 or 5 years, as, checking out a lot of their back catalog. And I was really excited about getting this this new record, or at least getting the chance to check it out. So, and on this record, it's got some of the coolest song titles: Incineration of the Gods, Sanctification Denied, and Satan Wept, which is killer. Stigma of Divinity, and Dancing in the Slaughterhouse, which is actually a cover song by a band called the Acid Drinkers, who I've never actually heard that name. Great band name, Acid Drinkers. That's fucking badass. And they are a Polish thrash band as well. Now, the one thing I will say about this is that the bass comes in really with the low end of the guitars. The kick drums are ferocious. They're an absolute sonic assault on the senses. You can sit there and listen, and they're just literally kicking the absolute shit out of your head from start to finish. Um, the guitar tones are absolutely excellent. And as I said, the vocals are probably some of the best I've heard on a death metal since the last time I listened to a Corpse record. Now, with the band. So as I stated in my preference, or my preface, I'm not a death metal fan aficionado. But with that being said, I've done a lot of record reviews on death metal bands. Funny I should say that, right? A lot of death metal bands that are local to me, mostly in Moncton. Not really anything out of Fredericton, but mostly in Moncton, and of course a couple bands in Toronto and Montreal, etc., etc. Again, all this having been said, I'm not a real true death metal fan, but I do know death metal. I can talk about it, not in the sense of like a true aficionado can, but I do have enough knowledge of the genre to be able to kind of go, okay, this is this is that, and this is that, and so on. The biggest thing about records with death metal is that the kick drums were, especially in the early days, were always the big issue. It's really hard to get the production of kick drums done well, and in this case, they are done well. The guitars, yet again, it's that sort of old buzzsaw thing that most, Swedish death metal bands were able to achieve back in the day. And the vocals have always been guttural, low, demonic, yada, yada, yada. In this case, the vocals are very guttural, very demonic. The kick drums, as I said earlier, were done very well. The guitar tones are almost an essential, it sounds very essential to the standard death metal tone, I should say. But I did find some of the tracks sounding way too similar. And yes, death metal is not going to have a lot of variety. Funny, you can do that. Now, lyrically, they're not all about ripping up corpses and so on and so forth. There's some Satanism in there. You've got, some war talk, stuff about war, and the other side of death metal, lyricism. Yet again, songs still sounded like they meshed to, like it's almost like one big song for about 2 or 3 tracks in a row. And it's not, I guess it's not that it's a bad thing for most fans. That's just not totally me, in terms of, like, I like some sort of diversity. My apologies. Now, I do wish the bass was mixed much better. Bands like Cannibal Corpse, you can hear the bass. Like Beyond Creation, Malevolent Creation, a lot of those you can hear the bass a lot more. And and I'm not saying that it's bad, because it's not. You can hear the bass, you can hear some really great fills, but it's almost as if everything else has to drop off and then the bass is there, and that's just to my ear. You guys can obviously sit there and argue about it in the comments, and that's totally your choice. What I will say is that the bass that I like to hear in a lot of my newer metal records is more attack, more top end, as it were. Like when you go listen to the new Havoc record, the bass is really in there. It mixes very well with the guitars. It's very audible. And it's almost like it has a bit of dark glass on there for for tone. So other than all of that, and like I said, the record, the bad bits were just it's mostly the bass, and some of the songs sounded like they could have molded into one whole long song. And the record is 29 minutes and 35 seconds, so there's 11 songs on there, and most of them are like anywhere from 2 to 4 minutes. So a killer record all in all, from start to finish, and for death metal is one of their classic bands, I give this 4 to 5. Thank you guys so very much for watching. I do apologize for a little bit of the yawning and so on. It is getting late. Well, I suppose it could be just late for me, but that's here nor there. Anyways, guys, thanks for checking in to review. If you guys have any other further bands that you want me to check out, I do have a few other records I want to review. And Havoc's 5 being one of them, or V, or whatever you want to say. I'm eventually going to get to that. That's a killer record. This is a killer record. If you guys have any other ones, feel free to let me know. I'm always willing to review. Get it to you.